Welcome to the December the 23rd, 1996 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie. As we bring you the history of our city, some of the people that have made history, some people that are still making history today, and we're very, very privileged. We have a very special couple that we're interviewing today for our history tape number 294. And this is a very exciting thing for us to do that because we're going to have two histories playing instead of It's Happening this week because we're getting into the Christmas holidays. We're very pleased today to bring Mr. and Mrs. Eddie Cox. Eddie, welcome to the set.
Thank you very much.
We're just so glad to have you with us.
Well, it's a joy to be with you today.
Wonderful. And Debbie Odom Cox.
Yes,
We're just really glad to welcome you to the set too with your sweet husband. And we just thank you all for taking time out of your tremendous schedule, since already today we had to delay your taping because you're out and about in Plano and around Dallas County and doing good things. So with your permission, Debbie, we'll start with Mr. Eddie, and we'll talk with him and let him tell us the beginning of this history. And when we do a history show, usually we develop your genealogy, tell about your early beginnings, and maybe make it a little bit more relevant to the people that watch our show. And since we're going to put this in the library in our archives, we wanted them to know the real Eddie Cox.
Okay.
So would you look out into your camera and let us know about your family, anything, and if you have a famous grandmother or grandfather that was a pirate or something like that. The kids really enjoy getting a history like that.
Well, I don't have any pirates in my background, but I do have a stage robber.
Oh, great.
So I'll have to tell you about that.
All right.
But, my family came to Grand Prairie back in 1952-53 during that period and moved into the northeast side of Grand Prairie at 37th Street. We were part of that immigration that came in to work at LTV, and then the first homeowners there in that end of Grand Prairie. My family comes from Louisiana. My mother was raised in Shreveport, Louisiana, and my father in Baton Rouge, where his father was the Dean of School of Engineering at LSU.
All right, would you give us their names?
Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Ed Cox, and my mother, Joanne Lawton Cox.
Great.
And but I wasn't born in Louisiana. I was born in Brooklyn, New York.
Mercy.
And that's because my grandfather went to NYU in New York City to be the Dean of School of Engineering up there. And my father thought it'd always be good to know the Dean of School of Engineering since he was an engineering major. And so he went up to New York with him, but just long enough for me to be born and then to realize that he was not a Yankee.
Yes.
He was a Southerner. And so they moved back down to this area and moved to Texas so that he could work at LTV. Then it was known as Chance Vaught.
Yes.
My parents, when I was about age 7, they did divorce, and my father moved back to New York to be near his parents, and then on to Richmond, and I've seen him several times since then. But my mother remarried into the D.M. Miller family, David Marshall Miller, and my first stepfather passed away when I was in high school, and then she married my step-uncle, and Bronk Miller. So
Kept it in the family.
Right, kept it in the family.
Yes.
And she has since passed away in 1983. But I guess if I was going to identify with the family here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it would be the Charlie Miller, Bronk Miller, and the Millers were one of the founding families of this area, living out in the Watson community. And that's where my stepfather Charlie is buried now. And my mother is buried out there as well. And that particular family is related to the Jordans and the Bowles. And so when Debbie and I had our rehearsal dinner prior to our marriage in 1976, 73, I'm sorry, our daughter's birthday. But in 1973, we had the rehearsal dinner in the Jordan Bowles home there in the Northeast Center.
For Grand Prairie.
A landmark, right. And for us to go back there and have that very special evening together in a family dwelling, that was real special to us. But when they were having, I believe it was maybe the centennial festivities back in the mid-60s, somewhere in there, they did a history of Grand Prairie, a little blue book. And I remember reading through that and reading about the Miller family and how my ancestors held up the stage between Dallas and Fort Worth.
Oh,
so
way to go.
We have a checkered past, what can I
Yes,
say?
yes.
But an enjoyable past as being part of the Miller family. That was a trucker cowboy culture that we're involved in rodeos and long trucking experiences and being part of the Saddle Club. So I guess the long-term relationships were basically through the Saddle Club and things like that here in
Did you have
town.
siblings you'd like to
Yes,
mention on this tape?
yes, sure. I have
Okay.
my sister Julie, who's living in Dallas now.
Her
and
name now?
is Julie Davenport.
Okay.
And then Joni Scott, who lives in Richardson as well. And then I have my half-brother, Charlie Miller,
Yes.
and his son, Charles Henry Miller III, who
All
live
right.
here in Grand Prairie, and out in near here, a couple of blocks from here, in fact. So that's pretty much my beginnings here in Grand Prairie.
All right, and you attended what schools?
Okay, I attended Fannin Elementary School and then funneled up to Jefferson Junior High.
All right.
And in fact, my first year there was Hobbs Williams' first year as the principal. So I had him for 3 years there and then went to Grand Prairie High School, and he followed me on up there. He didn't trust me up there by myself.
I see.
And so he came up there with me, and we spent 3 years there together, and he a couple of years after that. Took him a little bit longer to graduate than it did me.
Did you?
But my experiences in the Grand Prairie Public Schools were really, I guess there are two important factors to my life, and one is when I accepted Christ as my Savior. That, of course, was just a pivotal moment in my life, but then also influences that I had through special teachers throughout my life.
Would you like to name or drop some of those? Yes.
I'd probably leave out a few and hurt a few feelings.
Yes.
But as teachers in elementary school, Mrs. Garvin, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Sealock, in junior high, Mrs. Miller, just so many coaches that I had through the year.
Oh, yes.
They were pretty much my surrogate parents. And then Papa, that's Earl Tom Keel.
Oh,
As I was involved with the public schools and their music programs, he was my voice teacher, confidant, and just
good buddy.
Good friend, and
Yes.
continues to be a very close friend and a good advisor, counselor, and a father in so many ways. And I just really am so thankful to the teachers that I had in my past who just took me in and knew some of the needs that I had and were sensitive to those needs, and not only taught me the 3 R's, but a lot of other very important principles that I fall back on in all the decisions of my life. The core principles are very important, and they gave me to
Since
me.
you're a gopher,
Yes.
the most exciting thing, other than meeting Debbie at Grand Prairie High School, what was the highlight of your years at Grand Prairie High School?
Oh, there were so many.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I had a lot of highlights, but probably the most important was when I was selected to represent Grand Prairie and sing in Carnegie Hall with American Airlines Youth Performs. To go up there knowing that I was representing the music department at Grand Prairie High School and the years of investment that Earl Tom had made in my life, and my family as they supported me and paid for those voice lessons.
Oh,
and
yes.
drove me there to be there in New York City and sing on the stage in Carnegie Hall.
Yes.
Was a very, very special moment.
Yes, we're going to get back with you in just a few minutes. We're going to have to give Deb some equal time here.
He usually doesn't give me equal time.
I
Just a
know
little
that
bit.
I know that he doesn't, but we're going to have a command performance today, Debbie.
Very good.
Tell us about your early genealogy, and then we're going to get up to the place where you came to Grand Prairie High School and met this young man.
Okay. Well, ironic enough, our families moved to Grand Prairie at about the same time,
I see.
and my parents chose to move to the northwest part of town.
Yes.
So I grew up on Strong Parkway.
All right.
My
Name your family.
Right. My father is H.Y. Odom, Hewell Odom, and he was a pharmacist at Miller Drug for years and years and years. He's retired now. Just celebrated his 80th birthday
How wonderful.
in March, and he's in great shape. He's in better shape than I am. My mother is Alice Smurl Odom. Both my parents' families were from Dallas and the Addison area, so
Yes.
they didn't grow up in Grand Prairie or anything. I'm the oldest of 4 children.
All right.
And then I have a brother that's 2 years younger than I am, Keith Odom.
Yes.
He lives here in Grand Prairie with his wife, Elizabeth.
All right.
And then I have a sister, Cindy Odom Fuller, who lives in Arkadelphia, Arkansas,
Yes.
with her husband, Charlie, and their 3 girls. And they are both on the staff at Ouachita, music staff at Ouachita Baptist University.
Okay.
And then I have a sister, Janet Odom, who lives here in Grand Prairie. Actually, she lives across the street from my parents, so when I go to see them, I can see her too.
Yes, that is wonderful. All right. And you attended what schools here in Grand Prairie?
I attended Houston Elementary.
Any special teachers at Houston Elementary?
Oh, there were a lot of, there was Ms. Hodges, there was Mr. Dausch, I had Ms. Parnell. I can't even remember.
Any special mentor there that was over and above any of the others that are just casually named?
They were just all great teachers.
Yes.
And I really had a good time there in that school.
And on from Houston to?
Then I went to Adams
All right.
Junior High, and I was one of the first ones to get to go in there because it was a brand new school and
All
opened
right.
up, and that was a really big deal.
Yes.
And then I went to Grand Prairie High School.
But let's
of course.
back up to Adams. That's middle school. Any mentors, any special classes, teachers, or anything?
Yeah, it seems like I had a crush on my 9th grade math teacher. I can't think of Mr. Fletcher, but he was a good teacher too.
Yes. Okay.
And I had a lot of good teachers there.
Yes.
I think Miss Holly and
Yes.
several of them.
Okay. And then on to Grand Prairie High
And
School.
then on to Grand Prairie High School.
Became a gopher, full-fledged.
Gopher.
All right.
Played in the marching band and in the concert band.
All
and
right.
then
What instrument?
clarinet.
Okay.
And then I got really desperate one year and tried to branch off to the bassoon, but I found out that
Yes.
wasn't for me. And
Uh-huh.
then, of course, was in choir for 3 years.
All right. Under whose tutorage?
Of course, Mr. Keel.
Mr. Earl Tom Keel again. Okay. He's
Right.
played an important role in your life, hasn't
In
he?
both of our lives, he sure
Yes.
has.
Yes. And why did you desert the band and go to choir?
Well, I did both.
Oh, you did both?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I did band instead of PE.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to get all the music in I could.
All right. Why
That
this
was my
great
first
interest
love.
in music?
Just, I've always loved music. And thought really that I would major in music in college, and I actually started off in music and then decided to minor in music and go into education.
Okay. But at Grand Prairie High School, did you have other favorite teachers that motivate you, that were your mentor, friend,
There were
good buddy?
There were a lot of them. Miss Luttrell, Pat Luttrell was a good friend. I was her TA, but she was a good friend too.
Yes.
Gosh, there were just a lot of them.
How did you meet this young man?
Well, that's an unbelievable story. Do you want me to tell it or him?
I'd like for him to tell it. What do you think? If it's unbelievable,
It's
I want him to
unbelievable.
have the honor of doing
Okay,
that.
well, back in those days, your first year of high school was your 10th grade, your sophomore
Yes,
year.
uh-huh.
And I was in Mrs. Pierce's sophomore English class, first day of school, and 2 young ladies walked in the classroom,
Oh yes.
Debbie and a real good friend, Sandy Ahmet Farah.
Yes.
And I just said, I'm going to marry one of those 2 girls.
You take my choice, right?
Yeah, I'm going to marry one of those 2 girls. I don't know, a revelation, whatever.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so I dated Sandy just a little bit
Yeah.
that sophomore year, maybe our junior year a little bit, but we became very, very close friends. And then toward the end of our junior year, I finally got up my guts and asked Debbie out for
Yes.
a date, dialed and hung up, and then I finally
Got through.
got through,
Yes.
and we started dating at the end of our junior year, and then toward the end of our senior year, we became promised, and then in college, right before her senior year, we became engaged formally,
Yes.
and then we're married in January of 1973.
73. We haven't. We'll get it right. Oh, 1973.
In 1973. But
Uh-huh.
it's high school sweethearts.
Yes.
And
Any special event happened at high school that I ought to know about, like your promise time on stage?
You already know this story very good.
Yeah, I've heard that through the grapevine, but I've never heard it from the
straight from the
pony's
horse's mouth.
Oh yes. Uh-huh.
Well, Eddie had decided that he wanted to give me this promise ring. And it just so happened that we both had leads in the musical Oklahoma that year. I was Laurie and he was Curly. And so there's a part in the script where Curly proposes to Laurie, and she of course accepts. Well, he decided he wanted to give me the ring on stage, even though that wasn't part of the script.
Yes.
So he cleared it with Mr. Keel because he, really needed his permission to be able to change the script like that. And so he said, of course. So he popped the question to me on stage, but I had no prior warning that he was going to do this.
Yes.
And it totally caught me by surprise. He was afraid that I would say, "Oh, Eddie," instead of, calling him by his
By
name,
Curly,
by
yeah.
Curly. But I kept my cool somehow and managed to make it through the rest of the production. But Mr. Keel, of course, was clued in, and he was
Yes.
just ecstatic. And
Just loving it.
Yeah, he managed to have the orchestra play a few extra measures there and give Debbie enough time to gain
Get
her
my composure.
And the only friend that I had told about it was Sandy Ahmet Farah. And
Yes.
so she was waiting in the wings, and as the scene started, she told a lot of friends. So as soon as the scene ended and Debbie came off stage, you can imagine everybody was just...
Everybody was asking me, "What is it? Let me see your ring. What does it mean?" and all this, and what happened. And of course, I just said, "I don't know," but I knew I had to change into my next outfit, and the show must go on. So I didn't have time to really think about it too much till after the production was over that night.
Her dad asked her about it that evening.
Yeah, that night when I
would
got
think.
home, Daddy said, "Well, who promised who what?" And I said, "Well,
Yes.
this is just." That was back when it was popular, to have the promise ring first, sort of a sign of commitment, but it wasn't the real formal engagement.
All right, let's have a little bit more. After we left Grand Prairie High School, then
Okay, we began, for me, a pilgrimage that continues in higher
Yes.
education.
yes,
Went to Baylor University, Mary Hardin Baylor, and graduated from Mary Hardin Baylor with a degree in psychology, and then on to Southwestern Seminary in a degree in Master of Religious Education,
okay,
Oklahoma Baptist University, a degree in secondary teaching,
all right,
and then continuing education in Europe with University of Bordeaux, where we both learned French, continued our French studies,
yes,
and then for me, University of Cambridge in England, following interest in Victorian literature, and then Spurgeon's College in London, England, with a diploma in Christian studies. So a lot of my pilgrimage, right out of college was just continuing education,
yes.
and value education and look forward to other opportunities. That was the continuing of my life, and Debbie went on from high school.
all right. Debbie, what happened to
Well,
you after high school?
I went to Mary Hardin Baylor. It's now known as the University of Mary Hardin Baylor,
Yes,
but it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, so I
Yes.
still call it Mary Hardin Baylor. And spent 3.5 wonderful years there. I was able to finish up a little bit early because I went to summer school. But we were 40 miles apart during that time, and it wasn't easy because that was back in the olden days where all college kids didn't have cars.
Yes.
So we kept the Greyhound bus lines in business, I think.
Southwestern Bell.
And Southwestern Bell. But we managed to survive those 3.5 years and were married at Christmas time, or just right after Christmas, when I had just finished my senior year.
And then, after you married,
Then we lived in Temple, Texas for,
and you followed him on all of these other sojourns.
right after that.
Yes.
We lived in Temple for a while, and I taught school for 3 years in Belton, and he worked at Scott and White Hospital and then did some work in one of the churches down there. And then we got up to the Dallas area and were able to live up here in Irving for about 4 years.
Is that the longest you've been at one site? Probably 4 years.
Until we went overseas, we were sort of doing everything in 4-year segments, but we've been in Europe now for 13 years, so I guess we've broken the cycle.
All right. Tell me about Europe.
Well, to tell you about Europe, I have to back up just a little bit, because when I graduated from high school, plans were to go into some type of music education. And from that, I just felt, I don't know, the Lord pulling me a different direction into some type of full-time Christian ministry. And that's evolved from, not really evolved, but there's been just different steps along the way. And part of that was in 13 years of youth ministry, working in Baptist churches with young people. And 6 of those 13 years involved in the music ministry of the different churches, so it was a combination work. But back in '82, we were serving a church in Oklahoma, had been there for 4 years, one of those 4-year increments, and really felt the pulling of the Lord to go overseas and be involved in some type of cross-cultural, cross-lingual ministry abroad, And long story short, we ended up in France, where I worked at the University of Bordeaux as a university chaplain there at a university of 50,000 students. Did that for 6 years, and then for 4 years following that, did church planting, planted a little church in a downtown area there in Bordeaux, a city of about 750,000 population. And then following that in 1994, we had the opportunity to join the administrative staff of the Foreign Mission Board's work in Europe. In Europe right now, the Foreign Mission Board, Southern Baptist Convention, has 450 personnel, and the segment for which I'm responsible is in Western Europe, which comprises 14 countries on a line from Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Austria, Italy, and everything back west to the Atlantic. And
encompassing how many people?
We have 250 personnel.
250 personnel.
And so
that's a big responsibility.
Well, it's a lot of people.
Yes.
But I'm their administrator, their pastor, their confidant, their soft shoulder at times, sometimes their hard shoulder as you...
And sick 'em.
Oh, yes, as you nudge them on.
Yes.
But that's a major part of what I do. And then when we look forward to going back, I'll continue wearing those many hats, but one additional element of my work will be to represent the Baptist World Alliance, which is the umbrella organization for all Baptists around the world, 36 million Baptists, and represent the BWA to the United Nations in Geneva. And with that, being able to lobby on behalf of Baptists around the world for religious liberty and human rights issues, to coordinate relief efforts with other human relief or aid groups from around the world, so that we can be able to say, well, here is a definite need in Zaire, for example, and which organization can fill this need, which organization can fill this particular need. So to coordinate that type of work with the United Nations.
I just wonder if Billy Graham's going to feel threatened by all of this power that you're going to. I just think that is wonderful.
I don't think so.
All right.
I don't think so.
All right, while you're enjoying that remark, I need to get back with Debbie, because Debbie's going to be busy building a family, and I need to know about the family now.
Right.
Well, our family is, our children are grown now. They're both in college.
Let's tell about the children, their names and all of the
Right.
good stuff.
Our oldest is Jennifer Lynn. She's just recently had senior hours at SMU. She's in her 3rd year at SMU.
Doing what?
She has a double major in French and advertising.
Oh, how exciting.
Doesn't know what she's going to do with it exactly, but
Uh-huh.
she is real excited about that. Those are two things that she really enjoys and feels like
And
she
she's
has
of
talent.
what age?
She's 20.
She's 20, just right.
Yes. And then our son, our youngest, is a freshman at Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos.
Okay.
And so he's-
interested in campusology?
He is interested in art.
Oh, how
He's
wonderful.
really interested in art.
Advertising and art and French, that all.
Well, maybe they can get together and do something together. I don't know.
Yes.
But he also is real interested in music and really had a hard time deciding which one he wanted to major in, but then he went with the art.
Well, while they were growing up and going to school and all this, did you follow him on these sojourns, or did you send him packing?
Right, I sent him packing because when the kids were little, of course, I wasn't free to travel with him. Now, even the last 3 years when we've been in Germany, I've traveled with him some because Jeremy's been old enough, to leave at home some. But our relationship and our lifestyle will change, I think, when we go back this next time, because I will be free to travel with him all the time, and we won't have that. We've got to phone home, or we've got to think about, is Jeremy eating right, or things like this while we're
Yes.
gone. So,
Will you have a certain assignment? Is he going to be the boss?
well,
Never.
I do have a certain assignment of my own, but part of my responsibility is to undergird him and be with him and minister alongside him, because a lot of our ministry is being with the missionaries in their homes and seeing their ministries and working with them. And a lot of times the women, want to confide in me, whereas the
Yes.
men have more things in common with Eddie. So I think it's important that I'm there.
But that other assignment.
My other assignment is I'm the prayer coordinator for Europe, which
Mercy.
means that as our missionaries have prayer requests, it can be for their ministries, personal prayer requests, or maybe they have family members here in the States that are going through crisis or illness or anything, they send those prayer requests in to me, and then by email on my computer, I get those sent out back here to Richmond primarily, because they go on our prayer network here. There's an 800 number that Southern Baptists can call in, and there's all kinds of periodicals that come out with these updated prayer requests. But then I get these out virtually all over the world through email so that we can pray for one another. And
Aren't you glad you have a partner like this?
Well, Lord knew what he was doing when he sent those 2 girls through the room
Yes,
that day.
yes. And they left Sandy with us here because
Right.
Sandy Farrow is a special young lady
She certainly
in
is.
our circles also. In about 2 minutes that we have left, is there anything real important that must be on this tape? Because we're winding this thing down in 2 minutes. What do you want to say?
My goodness. I don't know. I guess I would just first have to say thank you to a man who stopped in a baseball game that was in progress with a bunch of boys down on Hensley Drive,
Yes.
down the northeast side of town, and came up and stopped our game and invited us to go to church with him on his church bus.
Yes.
And I was one of the young men that said, I'll go, after he promised me a baseball.
I see.
But that when I went to his church, I heard the gospel message, and that changed my life radically, and I'm just very thankful for that man. He worked for the fire department. I can't remember his name, but God used him, and I pray that
And
God
he
might
took you
use
to
me.
what church?
Took me to Calvary Baptist Church.
To Calvary Baptist. We're going to have to look him up that many years ago, find out who was driving the bus at that particular
That's
time
right.
and was a fireman.
That's right.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you all so very much for being here and sharing just, we could have talked for an hour.
I can't
know.
believe 30 minutes is
Oh,
up
I
already.
can't believe 30 minutes are gone. One last word from you, Debbie.
Well, I would just have to say that our home church here, First Baptist, has been so good to us. They furnish us a home to live in every time we come back. But it goes back a long way, because I grew up in First Baptist, and there's just some really special people there. And my life would not have been the same without their influence.
Well, now, since you keep the prayer list, basic service, you better put yourselves on the prayer list as a request from everyone in Grand Prairie that you'll be successful, you'll do the Lord's work in wherever He sends you. And I just think it's wonderful, and it's been my delight and pleasure to have you on this show. You ought to say amen, or one more half-second thing before we leave this.
Amen. It's been good to be here today.
Yes, it's just been delightful. I thank you all so very much. Wish you more than Godspeed. If there's anything else that we could wish for you and pray for you, we would do that. And thank you for sharing with the Saturday morning prayer group that meets here in Grand Prairie, because that got us off to a good start for this interview.
Okay.
Right. Thank you for
Thank you
asking
all.
us.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.